Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth.
Today's game is Psychedelica of the Ashen Hawk. The second in this series shifts genre, time period, and even more from its predecessor. Is this pseudo-sequel worth a read? Psychedelica of the Ashen Hawk is the second game in the visual novel Otome duology, and while it has some Easter eggs, you aren't required to play the first game to enjoy this one. You play as Jed, a girl cursed with an eye that turns red when her emotions are heightened, which in the town she lives in would brand her a witch. To avoid discovery, Jed lives her life as a boy with her adoptive mother and two adoptive brothers. They are leaders of the Wolf Clan, one of two clans that rule this small town, the other being the Hawks. The power struggle and conflicts between the Wolf and Hawk clans define the primary conflict in the story. Jed has moved out of her adoptive family home as she's beginning to show more feminine physical traits and lives in a tower far from town with a man called Ashen Hawk. Jed is still highly invested in the town's well-being, however, and is tasked to find a sacred object before the town's masquerade festival. To infiltrate the Hawks and get information, Jed decides to dress up as a woman, and as you can imagine that when she does this, those who only know her as a boy treat her very differently. While there is more to the story, I don't want to spoil it, but I will say that after the somewhat slow first few chapters, the story ramps up considerably, with a surprisingly hefty dose of tragedy and events that I didn't think would show up in an Otome. It can get pretty dark, with characters you think you've had figured out being much more underneath, for better or often worse, and the twists will keep coming until the very end. The story here is first and foremost before the usual Otome romance. The game's structure is somewhat similar to the first game in that you have access to a flowchart from the start, and as you progress you have access to maps, usually during the first couple chapters, that contain various side episodes you can read to better understand the city. You also can switch between your boy and girl costume on these side episodes, which changes the perspective of various characters, and there's also little snippets of thinking that townsfolk can provide, though they're only like 1 or 2 sentences. There are 3 key boys in the main routes to give your attention to, your 2 adopted brothers and the leader of the Hawks, as well as a mysterious 4th that ties to the true ending, and there's a lot more I could say about Ashen Hawk, but suffice to say it is an Otome with more of a focus on its story than romance, with lots of side content to explore and a great protagonist. So what did I like about Psychedelica of the Ashen Hawk? Well, Jed is one of the best Otome protagonists I have ever read. Maybe even one of the best visual novel protagonists in general. She's proactive, competent, has her own goals and motivations, while also having a good number of character flaws. Additionally, once you clear Act 1, the story's pacing is breakneck into some absolutely devastating plot twists, tons of bait and switches, and almost all the foreshadowing leading to excellent payoffs. And lastly, I enjoyed all of the characters in this game. Unlike the previous one where there were a few duds, they're all complex, have strength and some massive shortcomings, and everything they do makes logical sense even if it doesn't necessarily help the main character. When it comes to the bad, the first couple of chapters definitely drag, and this is because all of the side reading is just in those first 3 chapters. I do not know why they made that decision. And speaking of the side stories, the bite-sized chats with villagers are not only kind of tedious, they're also generally very uninteresting, and you have to read all of them to get the best endings, making it feel like busy work. And lastly, the music actually started to drive me crazy, so I muted it. It isn't bad music, it's just less ambient than the previous game, and hearing it so often really started to grate on me. As you know, alright games turn a 3-point scale, must play, maybe consider, and don't bother. And I liked the first Psychedelica game quite a bit, but the Ashen Hawk just blows it out of the water. It is an excellent and emotional story with tons of fantastic twists, characters, and ideas stretched out across its runtime. While it does have some early pacing issues, it is still absolutely worth reading if you have any affinity for visual novels, Otome or otherwise, and it's a shame that this is often overlooked by the fandom. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Have you even heard of Psychedelica Ashen Hawk? Are you going to give it a read now that I've recommended it? Please let me know what you think about this in the comments, and regardless, make sure you go out there and give this one a look.